Hillman sets a screen, rolls to the basket. Gray.
Welcome back to Clark U.S. fans. When Sophie Cunningham arrived at the Indiana Fever, most people thought they already understood the narrative. It sounded simple, almost too easy to explain. She was there to protect Caitlin Clark, to bring toughness, to be the enforcer, the physical presence who would stand her ground when things got heated. But that surface-level story missed the truth entirely. This wasn't a random move, and it certainly wasn't just a front office decision. What people didn't see was that this moment had been forming long before it ever became public. Cunningham hadn't just stepped into a role. She had been preparing for it, consciously and unconsciously, for years. Her journey toward becoming one of the most feared and respected competitors in the league didn't begin under bright arena lights. It started in a small taekwondo studio in Columbia, Missouri, where a 6-year-old girl tied a black belt around her waist before she even fully understood the world around her. That detail alone tells you everything you need to know. Discipline, intensity, and controlled aggression were never learned traits for her. They were foundational. Growing up in Columbia, Missouri, Sophie Cunningham didn't just come from a sports family. She came from a legacy of athletes where competition wasn't encouraged, it was expected. Her father played college football at Missouri. Her mother competed in track and field. Her sister was a basketball player, and extended family members all had deep ties to collegiate athletics. In that environment, sports weren't just games, they were identity. But even in a household filled with competitive energy, Sophie stood out. At an age when most children were still figuring out coordination, she was mastering discipline through martial arts. Earning a black belt in Taekwondo at just 6 years old isn't just impressive, it's almost unheard of. That early training didn't just teach her how to fight, it taught her how to control force, how to remain composed under pressure, and how to respond instinctively when challenged. Later, her training expanded into Krav Maga, a system built around real-world self-defense scenarios. By the time she seriously committed to basketball, her mindset was already different from everyone else on the court. She didn't just think about scoring or winning, she understood positioning, protection, and physical presence at a level most athletes never reach. That mentality carried into her high school years at Rockbridge High School, where she didn't just play, she dominated. Leading her team to 4 consecutive state championships, she became the program's all-time leading scorer and established herself as a force that couldn't be ignored. But her story wasn't just about basketball success. When the school's football team needed a kicker after an injury, she stepped up without hesitation and delivered under pressure, proving her versatility and fearlessness. At the same time, she balanced that toughness with charisma, being crowned homecoming queen while still wearing her football uniform, a moment that perfectly captured the duality of her personality. She was intense, unapologetically physical, and relentlessly competitive, yet she also carried confidence and presence that drew people in. Even as a child, teachers had noted her aggressive nature in sports, describing her as too intense, too physical. But her parents saw something different, not a problem, but potential. When she arrived at the University of Missouri, that potential turned into dominance. Over the course of her college career, Cunningham didn't just contribute, she rewrote history. With over 2,100 career points, she became the program's all-time leading scorer, breaking records that had stood for decades. Her consistency was remarkable, averaging 17 points, over 5 rebounds, and multiple assists per game across 129 starts. She became known not just for scoring, but for her relentless energy, her ability to impact every possession, and her refusal to back down from any challenge. By her senior year, she was doing things no one else in the country was doing, combining scoring, rebounding, and efficiency at an elite level.
With her hand in her face.
Honors followed naturally, multiple All-SEC selections, All-American recognition, and national respect. Yet, even as she built a legacy, criticism followed her just as closely. Opponents labeled her aggressive, sometimes even dirty. Crowds booed her. Coaches built strategies around containing her physicality. But none of it changed her approach. If anything, it reinforced it. That same mentality followed her into the WNBA when she was drafted 13th overall by the Phoenix Mercury in 2019. Being drafted, however, was only the beginning. The transition to the professional level tested her in ways she hadn't experienced before. Her rookie season was uncertain, filled with limited opportunities and moments where she had to fight just to stay on the roster. Injuries to teammates created unexpected chances, but with those chances came pressure. Early struggles with shooting and confidence could have derailed her, but they didn't. Instead, she leaned into the one thing that had always defined her effort. Coaches praised her for doing the small things, hustling, defending, positioning, and playing every possession as if it mattered more than the last. Then came the breakthrough moments, games where everything clicked, where her intensity translated into production, and where it became clear that she belonged at this level. Perhaps the most important part of her development in Phoenix came from learning alongside Diana Taurasi, one of the greatest players in basketball history. As a backup early in her career, Cunningham had a front-row seat to greatness. She observed, learned, and absorbed everything: how to stay ready, how to handle adversity, how to navigate the mental side of professional competition. That experience shaped her more than any stat line ever could. Over time, she earned her place, working her way into the starting lineup and proving that her impact went far beyond numbers. She became known as a player who could shift momentum, who could bring energy, and who could change the tone of a game simply through effort and presence. Off the court, she continued to grow, gaining international experience by playing overseas and expanding her understanding of the game. She even stepped into broadcasting, showing a personality that was as direct and unfiltered as her playing style. Every role she took on, every challenge she faced, added another layer to her identity as a competitor. By the time she reached her breakout performances, including high-scoring games and consistent contributions, she had fully evolved into a complete player, one who could score, defend, lead, and most importantly, set the tone. So when she eventually found herself aligned with Caitlin Clark, it wasn't coincidence, it was the culmination of everything she had built. The toughness, the discipline, the refusal to back down, the instinct to protect and stand her ground, all of it made sense in that moment. She wasn't just filling a role. She was embodying it. What people once misunderstood as aggression or intensity revealed itself as something much deeper: preparation meeting opportunity. Sophie Cunningham didn't become one of the most feared players in women's basketball overnight. She became that player because every step of her journey, from a taekwondo studio in Missouri to the biggest stages in the sport, was shaping her into exactly who she needed to be.
And the Sun hustle for the board. Good hands by Phoebish and the loose ball.
Not every great team is built only on superstars. Some are built on players who don't always dominate headlines, but quietly decide outcomes, possession by possession, moment by moment. Sophie Cunningham became exactly that kind of player for the Phoenix Mercury, not always the face of the franchise, but undeniably one of its most essential pieces. She wasn't there to chase highlight reels or inflate stat sheets. She was there to do the work that wins games when everything else breaks down: the hustle plays, the physical defense, the timely shots, and the emotional energy that lifts an entire roster when momentum starts slipping. In many ways, she became what coaches often call the sixth starter, the X factor who impacts the game in ways that don't always show up in the box score but become painfully obvious to anyone watching closely. She was the player diving for loose balls in October, taking contact without complaint, hitting a crucial three when defenses collapsed elsewhere, and bringing an intensity that forced everyone around her to match her level. Over time, that role didn't just define her, it elevated her. By the time she reached her sixth season in Phoenix, Cunningham had become one of the longest-tenured players on the roster, alongside legends like Diana Taurasi and Brittany Griner. That kind of longevity in professional sports doesn't happen by accident. It means surviving coaching changes, adapting to new systems, adjusting to different teammates, and pushing through every kind of adversity a franchise can face. Rosters changed, expectations shifted, leadership evolved, but through all of it, she remained constant. She stayed ready. She kept working. And slowly but surely, she transformed into exactly the kind of player any team would want beside a generational talent, especially one under constant scrutiny like Caitlin Clark. Everything that Cunningham had built over the years, every lesson, every challenge, every moment of growth, led to a single night that would change the trajectory of her career and her public identity forever. June 17, 2025. Connecticut Sun vs. Indiana Fever. Gainbridge Fieldhouse. On the surface, it was just another regular season game. But in reality, it became one of the most talked about moments in modern women's basketball. To understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to look at the context leading up to it. Caitlin Clark's rookie season in 2024 had been anything but smooth. While rookies are always tested at the professional level, what Clark experienced went beyond the usual adjustment period. The physicality directed at her was relentless, often crossing the line between competitive play and outright targeting. Hard fouls became routine. Dangerous closeouts left her hitting the floor again and again. And week after week, it felt like little was being done to stop it. Reports suggested that Christy Sides and the Fever staff were sending clips to league officials, asking for better protection, more accountability, some kind of response. But nothing seemed to change. Clark quickly became one of the most heavily targeted players in the league, not just because of her skill, but because of what she represented. The Fever front office saw the situation clearly. They didn't just need talent, they needed presence, toughness, someone who wouldn't hesitate when things crossed a line. That's where Sophie Cunningham came in. General Manager Amber Cox had identified her as a perfect fit long before the trade became reality. A fierce competitor, a reliable shooter, and someone who brought intensity on both ends of the floor. But more than that, she was someone who understood what it meant to stand her ground. Then came the moment that defined everything. During that June 17th matchup, tensions had already been building throughout the game. In the third quarter, JC Sheldon made a physical play that resulted in contact with Clark's eye, the kind of moment that had become all too familiar over the season. Cunningham saw it. She didn't react immediately.
Shot clock.
Instead, she carried it with her, letting it sit, letting it build. And then, in the fourth quarter, with the Fever already in control of the game, she made her move. She grabbed Sheldon and pulled her to the floor, not wildly, not recklessly, but with a level of control and precision that reflected years of disciplined training. It wasn't chaos. It was intentional. The referees responded instantly with an ejection, a flagrant foul. But the impact of that moment extended far beyond the game itself. Within hours, clips of the incident were everywhere. Within days, Cunningham's social media following exploded, jumping by hundreds of thousands, then millions. Her jersey sold out across retailers. Fans who had never watched a WNBA game suddenly knew her name. The reaction was massive, polarizing, and impossible to ignore. What made the situation even more remarkable was how Cunningham handled it afterward. When a fan-created fundraiser began circulating to cover her fine, she didn't just accept it, she flipped the narrative entirely. Turning it into a joke at first, she then redirected the attention into something meaningful by supporting charity efforts, showing that behind the intensity was a sense of awareness and responsibility. And when she finally addressed the media, she didn't deliver a long explanation or try to soften the moment. She said 5 simple words: "I protect my teammates." That statement didn't just explain her actions, it defined her identity. But Cunningham didn't stop at physical protection on the court. She took it a step further by becoming one of the most vocal defenders of Clark off the court as well. On her podcast, she openly discussed what many around the league had only hinted at, that the targeting of Clark wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Players were sending messages, testing boundaries, trying to establish dominance over a rookie who had entered the league with unprecedented attention. Cunningham acknowledged that some level of toughness is expected for rookies, but she made it clear that what Clark was facing had gone too far. Her willingness to speak openly gave her words weight. This wasn't an outsider commenting on the situation. This was a veteran who had been in those locker rooms, who had heard those conversations firsthand. And when she spoke, people listened. She didn't limit her criticism to players either. When controversy arose involving league leadership, Cunningham again didn't hold back, calling out what she saw as failures in protecting players and representing the game properly. Her comments went viral almost instantly, further solidifying her reputation as someone unafraid to say what others wouldn't. In many ways, Cunningham became something rare in modern sports, completely authentic. She wasn't carefully crafting a brand or calculating her image. She was simply being herself, the same way she had always been since childhood. The intensity, the honesty, the willingness to stand up in difficult moments, none of it was new. The only difference was that now, the entire world was watching. And that's what makes her story so powerful. She didn't rise to prominence by chasing attention. She earned it by staying true to who she was, by embracing the role others avoided, and by stepping up when it mattered most. In a league filled with incredible talent, Sophie Cunningham carved out a space that goes beyond statistics. She became a presence, a tone setter, a protector, and a voice. Not a traditional superstar, but in many ways, something just as important.
The last 2 games of this regular season is Citron takes and makes from deep.
What makes Sophie Cunningham different isn't just what she does on the court, it's what she's willing to say and stand for when everyone else stays quiet. She didn't stop at being a physical presence or a vocal leader inside the locker room. She pushed further, stepping directly into conversations that most players avoid entirely. At one point, she openly questioned the league's expansion decisions, calling out certain markets she felt didn't align with the vision of growth the league claimed to be building. That kind of honesty is rare, especially in a professional environment where image is carefully managed and players are often encouraged to stay within safe boundaries. But Cunningham has never been interested in playing it safe. When a city's social media team tried to respond by highlighting Caitlin Clark praising their market, it didn't shake her at all. By that point, she had already publicly criticized leadership at the highest level of the league. A social media response wasn't going to slow her down. Throughout the season, her willingness to speak out came with consequences. Fines started piling up as she repeatedly criticized officiating, especially when it came to what she saw as a consistent failure to protect Clark from unnecessary physicality. But even those penalties became part of her story in a way no one expected. When fans joked about starting a fundraiser to cover her fines, Cunningham leaned into it with her signature humor, creating her own version with an absurd multi-million-dollar goal. What started as a joke quickly turned into something meaningful when fans actually began contributing. Instead of keeping any of it, she redirected the money toward charity, turning controversy into impact without missing a step. It perfectly captured who she is: intense, unapologetic, but also self-aware and grounded. More than anything, she became something that Clark needed, but could never fully be herself, a voice without restrictions. As a rookie and the face of the league, Clark had to navigate every word carefully, balancing expectations, media attention, and her public image. Cunningham didn't have that limitation. As a veteran, she spoke freely, saying what others were thinking but unwilling to say out loud. She didn't worry about fines, backlash, or how her words might be received by league officials. For her, honesty mattered more than approval. And that authenticity resonated with fans in a way that polished statements never could. In a league often perceived as controlled and cautious, her raw, unfiltered presence felt real, and people responded to it. But what truly changes the way you understand this entire story is what came before she ever wore an Indiana Fever jersey. Long before the trade, before any rumors connected her to Indiana, Cunningham was already publicly supporting Clark. While still playing for the Phoenix Mercury, she openly praised Clark's impact on the game, calling her special, acknowledging the pressure she carried, and doing something she admitted she rarely does, expressing admiration for another player. These weren't calculated comments made after a deal was finalized. They were genuine, unsolicited, and recorded months before any move became reality. She wasn't positioning herself for a role. She was expressing respect. Moments between them started surfacing publicly as well. At events like the All-Star Game, cameras caught them interacting naturally, laughing, talking, connecting in a way that didn't look forced or new. So when the trade was finally announced in early 2025, Cunningham's reaction said everything. It wasn't hesitation or uncertainty. It was excitement. Immediate, visible, and impossible to fake. She shared moments of their past interactions, making it clear that this wasn't just another career move. It was something she genuinely wanted. That changes everything about how her role should be viewed. The idea that she was simply assigned to protect Clark doesn't hold up anymore. This wasn't a responsibility handed to her, it was something she embraced willingly. At her introductory press conference at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, she spoke with confidence about how her playing style fit perfectly into the system, how she felt re-energized by the opportunity, and how ready she was for this new chapter. Even her former coach in Phoenix acknowledged that her competitive nature made her a natural fit for exactly this kind of role.
A huge, rattling 3 turnovers in the
She wasn't stepping into unfamiliar territory. She was stepping into something she had been preparing for all along. Leaving a team like Phoenix, where she had spent years building relationships and stability, isn't something players take lightly. Especially not when you've played alongside legends like Diana Taurasi and Brittany Griner. But Cunningham made that decision without hesitation. Because for her, this wasn't about comfort. It wasn't about staying where things were familiar. It was about stepping into something bigger, playing alongside one of the most electrifying players in the sport, and contributing to something that felt meaningful. And then, just as everything started to come together, everything fell apart. Injuries hit the Fever roster in waves, turning what should have been a defining season into a test of resilience. Key players went down one after another, forcing constant adjustments and stretching the roster to its limits. Then came the moment no one expected. During a defensive play, Cunningham suffered a knee injury that ended her season. Just like that, the opportunity she had waited for, the chance to fully build chemistry, to establish her role, to compete at the highest level alongside Clark, was taken away. The timing made it even more difficult. After all the build-up, all the anticipation, she and Clark had barely shared the court together. Clark herself dealt with injuries, limiting her availability and disrupting the team's rhythm even further. At one point, the roster was so depleted that the team had to rely on emergency signings just to maintain enough active players. And yet, despite everything, the team continued to compete. They pushed through adversity, challenged top opponents, and proved that, even under the worst circumstances, they could still fight. For Cunningham, watching from the sidelines was undoubtedly one of the hardest parts. She had fought to get there, fought to be part of that moment, and suddenly she was forced to step back. But even then, her mindset didn't change. Instead of focusing on what she lost, she focused on what could have been worse. She spoke about her injury with perspective, acknowledging that it could have been far more severe. That mindset, finding something positive even in a setback, is part of what defines her. Her recovery became another chapter in her story. She attacked rehab with the same intensity she brings to the court, progressing faster than expected, pushing her limits and refusing to fade into the background. Even while sidelined, she remained visible, connected with fans, and continued to build her presence. She didn't disappear just because she wasn't playing. That's not who she is. And that's what makes her journey so compelling. It's not just about the games she plays or the moments that go viral. It's about consistency, in effort, in personality, in identity. Whether she's on the court, on the sidelines, or speaking out publicly, she remains the same person. Unfiltered, fearless, committed. Now, as the next season approaches, the question isn't whether Sophie Cunningham belongs at this level. She's answered that repeatedly. The real question is what comes next. Where does she take this momentum? How does she build on everything she's already established? Because if there's one thing her story has shown, it's that she doesn't follow predictable paths. She creates her own.